recording? Sorry about that. This new cell phone, just getting used to it. Doesn't even look like it was recording. But anyways, this video is not going to be like a gotcha or any of that stuff. It's probably nothing new that you haven't heard before. But I'm going to go ahead and go over anyways, When you're talking to Christians or theists, Muslims, whatever, it doesn't matter. Just when you live in a Western society, it's usually Christians you deal with. You'll start talking about the concept of evil in the world. Why is there evil? War, disease, poverty, and all this stuff. And of course, some atheists, when they're arguing with Christians, they think they have that gotcha. Look, there's evil in the world, so your God is evil and all this stuff. And they feel so proud of themselves. Of course, the Christians are going to just, or any theist, especially a Christian, will just retort, well, Adam and Eve sinned in the Garden of Eden. That's why we have sin, because they brought it into the world, and they can use their verses, and they pretty much going to win that argument if they're using the Bible, obviously. Of course, the argument doesn't really make sense. They technically don't win. They just, in their heads, they won the argument. They didn't really win when there's, and it doesn't make sense to you. It doesn't make sense to me. Why should we suffer because of what somebody did in the Garden of Eden? But that's not why the argument doesn't make sense now. Now you may wonder why it doesn't make sense. Well, God just, people want to do what they want to do, so God lets them do what they want to do, and there's all this constant because of their consequences of their sin and all this stuff. Okay, you have children. Okay, you have young children. You decide to let them do whatever they want because you can't get them to behave. You give them rules, you don't steal, don't cheat, don't do this, and this. Of course, they're not following your rules. It's like 10 Commandments, right? And all the other rules are in that Bible. Okay? They're not following those rules. So I will just let y'all do whatever y'all want. I'll just sit back and watch. Once in a while, I'll punish you by throwing a chair at you. I'll punish you by, beating you. I'll punish you by giving you colds, flus, diseases, food poisoning, things like that, until you learn to behave. First off, that's not going to cause your children to behave, okay? Second off, if you see someone doing that, what would you think about them? Would you think they're a good parent or a good person? Of course not. You'll think they're evil and they're bad and they're a bad parent. And the second thing is, how long do you think those kids are going to live? It's just some argument doesn't make sense. Their little argument about God you get all this sin and God allows it because people don't want to follow His rules. Well, maybe if they knew He existed, and of course another favorite argument though is like, well, He stays hidden because you got to have faith. It's good to have faith. Well, how about the parents decide to do that same type of thing too? They hide from their kids. Well, my kid's going to just have to have faith that I exist. If they search me, they'll find me. Well, if they don't have any evidence that you exist, they're not going to search for you. And prayer and all that stuff doesn't work. Because let's face it now. If you grow up in Saudi Arabia and someone says that to you, you're going to find the Muslim religion. You're going to find Islam. If you're growing up in the United States or most parts of Europe, chances are you're going to find Christianity. If you're growing up in Israel, you're going to find Judaism. In India, you'll find Hinduism. Various sects of Hinduism. Their argument just doesn't work. Because which God? It's always going to be my God. My God is the one that you're going to find. And you just don't want to do it. You just want to sin. So God allows all these bad things happen. Hurricanes and tornadoes and all this stuff. Because you just want to sin. And of course another question is, why can't God protect the children then? Or at least the young kids. They get sexually assaulted, growing up around drugs and stuff like that. How do you think they're going to grow up? They're going to be engaged in the same lifestyle. They're not going to be searching for your God. They're not going to have faith for your God. Of course, read Hebrews 11 verse 1. It gives you a pretty good definition of what they believe, what religious people at that time thought faith was. It's basically knowing what you can't believe, what you can't prove. You just believe it anyways without evidence. It's basically believing something without evidence. It's like saying, well, I believe that I want to find $1 million. I'm going to get $1 million today. I really believe it. I just have faith. I have faith I'm going to get that job. You have no evidence you're going to get that job. You have no evidence you're going to get that money. You have no evidence you're going to get that car or that house. And there's no reason for you to really believe it. You just do. Faith. Just got to have faith. And God just lets everyone do what they want to do because sin and all this stuff. And then, of course, they'll tell you the Bible is good moral, basis for your morals, or Quran. Read that book. The Quran's always, almost every verse disparaging women and people that don't believe what they believe. Go to the Quran Reloaded and the Bible Reloaded. Read those verses. I like the part where, Lamentations, I don't remember where it's at. It's probably it's a short book in the Bible. You can read it though. Basically, God thinks of his followers as basically a footstool. And then, of course, he said the Hebrews were worse than the people of Sodom and Gomorrah. And of course, most people think that means homosexuality. That's not what the way they were punished. You can read it and you can see it's because of they're being inhospitable. But that argument about, well, God lets people suffer and everything. We got suffering in the world because of sin. So why is it then when you have villages and towns, that follow this God, they still suffer? They don't do any better than anyone else. In fact, they do worse. The Middle East, they're pretty pious. They're following the Quran pretty well, especially like Saudi Arabia and Iran. And I'm part Iranian. I'm of Iranian descent. They are fault because let's face it, the people you think of as being the most violent, vile people tend to be the people following their holy books the closest, whether it's the Quran or the Bible or the Torah. The most racist, sexist, homophobic, violent, vile people follow their holy books very closely. So using it as a moral guide, especially the fact that it's okay with slavery, most holy books are, and child abuse and and other things with children, it's not very pleasant to mention. I wouldn't be using those as a moral guide. And the fact that your God is for it, tells you a little something. I just don't get that argument about, Adam and Eve thing. You gotta prove that this Adam and Eve existed first before you even can use that as a reason for all the problems in the world. And why would we have to suffer because of them? It makes no sense. And on another note, though, it has nothing to do with the topic we just discussed. Well, slightly, but not much. But we're gonna go a different direction. Okay. Now, you here in England and most of Europe, you got all these immigrants moving in. People complain about it and all this stuff. Well, if you read history, you would notice that not all of Europe, but England, France, even the United States, which isn't European. Obviously, I know that for somebody who's going to probably mention it. They went into all these countries and messed them up. They're so messed up because of Western I'm not saying anybody alive today is responsible for it and should be punished for it. But I'm saying your ancestors went to their countries, screwed their countries up. Your ancestors were not asked to come to India and Pakistan, African nations, and all this stuff to bring civilization. The white man's burden, which is to bring civilization to the world. You were not asked to bring that stuff. And when they went into those countries, they had to be in control and took over. And they basically took out the wealth. So now those countries are basically hellholes, a lot of them. So of course they're going to immigrate to countries that are safe to live in. And most of those immigrants, not all of them, most of them are just trying to have a decent life. Most of them. Now you say, well, some of them bring crime and all this stuff, and I agree, they are. But that's no different than when the Europeans went over and would shoot someone in the back or whatever for not doing what they were told to do and abusing people. I'm not saying it's right, the one justifies the other. I'm just saying you just gotta think about, what happened in the past. It's like, well, their nations were screwed up because of your ancestors. And really, why are you against? I'm talking about the people that are against them immigrating. Why are you against it? Now, I understand you believe that they should learn your values of your culture, learn your culture, your language, and should integrate. I agree with you on that. They should integrate. You don't move to another country and expect them to change. You're not going to move to China or South Korea or North Korea South Korea. Let's say South Korea because I don't think anybody wants to go to North Korea. But you're not going to go to South Korea or Japan or any of these other countries, and they're not going to change to you. They will not. So why should they come to Europe? Why should France or England or anything like that bow down to anyone else? They shouldn't have to change their language, their culture, or any of that stuff. However, why are you against them coming in? Is it because they have brown skin? I'm just throwing it out there. Why? And it doesn't seem like there's a huge amount of people, but there's enough to. I just don't. I understand you're worried about Muslims doing certain things, but most Muslims are not going to do that. What you think they're going to do. Some will, and you do have to watch them. But as they live in your countries, those particular immigrants might not be the most pleasant, but their children and will be an improvement. Their grandchildren. By the time they get to their grandchildren and great grandchildren, they would have probably have integrated. Most likely, majority of them will. It's usually by the third generation they tend to integrate. The first and second generation usually doesn't. That's just how it is. Well, that's it for the video. Bye.